were all just starting to have. And then Grey's Anatomy actually had to shut down in the middle of a scene because they were shooting a little bit later in the season. So then we go through the summer, and eventually the writers and producers come back, because before the actors ever hit the stage, the writers and producers have to meet and figure out some stories to tell, figure out what to write. So Paris, loop us in on exactly how these decisions got made in the writer's room with producers and writers to figure out how to include COVID-19 and social justice as part of the storyline.
Well, the way that it works is just a few weeks after we stopped shooting, we got back together again to start talking about the next season and what the stories would be. And in that process, we often interview a lot of doctors and first responders. And our original, or at least Krista's original hope was that COVID would be a short-lived phenomenon and wouldn't affect us as greatly. But as time went on, we saw that it was affecting people, at quite an enormous rate. And also, since our actual Station 20, which is the station that you see on television that plays the role of Station 19, it's only 15 minutes away from the nursing home that saw the first cases of COVID-19 in the United States. And so they were right in the middle of it, those real firefighters in the city of Seattle that we represented. And as Krista talked to more medical professionals, she saw that this would be the story of our times for Grey's Anatomy as well. And so she said, let's just incorporate COVID into our stories and have the season be placed starting in that May, June that we were actually in, which turned out to be both a brave and a brilliant choice for her, because it opened up a whole nother world of stories and a reality that reflected what we'd already all lived through. So that was how it all began.
So Paris was just talking about the protocols and how beneficial it was for our shows, because we were able to, by having COVID be part of the show, we're wearing masks on camera a lot, which actually helped made our show a lot safer than other shows that we're shooting. But it was also, I'll say from personal experience, my personal experience, not the most fun thing in the world to have to wear the mask, because most people get to take off a mask when you get into your office and you're by yourself. Our office as actors on the show is with other people, and our mask has to be on. So I'd love to hear from some of y'all how you felt about the PPE and all of that coming in.
I remember doing a scene in a bathroom where I had to, it was like seeing a walk and talk with Barrett, which had to start comedy and then turn really serious and be emotional as I was looking in the mirror in the bathroom. And those scenes, you're in your own brain and you're trying to be in there and stay in there, even in between changes, lighting changes, lens changes. You're just trying to stay in it and keep giving that performance over and over as much as you can, and keep giving different looks and kind of carving your own heart out for the camera. And what made it so much harder was you're in it, you finish a take, they're like, okay, we're just gonna change the lens real quick. And you're kind of in your own world. And then suddenly someone's like, Jay, hey, excuse me, Jay. Hey, how you doing? Can you put this mask on? Great, can you just put the mask on? Oh, I forgot to spray your hands. And you're trying to be in character and you're like, okay. And then they're like, you're doing great, by the way. And you wanna be like, please get out of here. Not because you don't like them or that their job isn't important, but because you are trying to desperately hold on to the moment that you are in as a character. So that was hard.
But I think all of the protocol, as strange as it was and jarring as it could be, the thing that I know I always kept on my mind, and most of our companies kept in mind, was that we were taking care of each other. So yeah, we had to wear this. Yeah, we had to put up a shield. Yeah, we were doing hand washing as we all were supposed to do, but it successfully kept these companies safe and well, not only within our companies, but then out to our extended families. So I really applaud the way we handled it, because we kept people working. And I know that's what I was thinking about when we were coming into the season. Crew is sitting around saying, how in the world are we going to be able to work on these circumstances? And we made it work for them. We made it work for the entire production. So I feel amazing about the fact that we were able to do this. And I'm sure Jason, you'll want to talk to being able to be a part of that, probably the most collaborative, right, we've ever felt this season, with being able to discuss where we're going and have a hand in the story that's being told.
It's definitely going to be part of the conversation. I mean, that's the whole point of this roundtable was, like I said, this is a, I mean, the whole COVID situation set the table for it's all hands on deck. Everybody's got to be paying attention and everybody's got to take some responsibility for making whatever you're doing happen. I mean, in the world, whatever you're doing, but also whatever job you're working on, we all need to take responsibility for ourselves and for each other. And so this season has been amazing on multiple levels. But before we get deep into that, I wanted to hear, Boris, your thoughts on the COVID of it all.
Well, I think what comes to mind for me, I always say that is gratitude. Gratitude in challenge and gratitude in opportunity. Because on the one hand, it brought us together in order to deal with this, not just one pandemic. I mean, we dealt with so many different pandemics in the past 15 months. And it also gave us an opportunity to, like Chandra said, to collaborate. And I got to give kudos again to Paris and Krista, and who have been fearless and courageous in tackling these issues in a way that they did it. But I always go back to gratitude, because it's not lost on me how lucky we are to be on a show like this, to be working in a pandemic, to, first of all, make believe for a living alone. That alone deserves a round of applause. You know, that alone is something that we should all be grateful for. And then to be able to do this throughout a tough time like these past 15 months, and be able to contribute to a collective sort of feeling of hope and again, inspiration is truly remarkable. So grateful.
It was a powerful thing for me when I felt blessed to be able to go back to work at a time when so many people could not. Couldn't work at all, and then people figured out how to work virtually. The fact that we could go back to work, I felt blessed. So gratitude is definitely a word. And we all began touching on the collaboration that came out of it and how it brought us closer together. And that brings us to the second lead character that 2020 and this season brought us, which is the conversation surrounding social justice. And Kasha, that is your wheelhouse. That's where you live. That is actually where you got hired, why you got hired on to Trip the Light, Christopher Arnold's production company. And first off, I don't know of another, director of diversity and inclusion for another production company. I don't know that you're the first one I've ever known. I wonder if you can give people an idea of what it is you do and how that position came to be.
Yes, this is a brand new position. We're in uncharted territories, and it actually came out of conversations that I had with Krista about the scripts, because there was a script I noticed. I worked at Krista's desk. There was a script I noticed that a character was written in a way that didn't feel respectful or accurate, and so I made a decision just to speak to her about it. And someone who was green to the business, I knew that there was writers of color in the writer's room. I'm like, how did this come through? But, I realized that it's a pressure situation, and should the onus be on the writer of a TV show to not only do a very difficult writing job, but also have to be the one to speak up and say, and be the race police, or say, hey, this doesn't feel right, because you don't know how that's going to be received. You want to kind of protect your interests. You don't know if someone's going to listen to what you say. So through that, we had a really good conversation. I explained, hey, this is what seems problematic. Krista was very open. We made some changes and everything went forward nicely. So we had kind of had an ongoing conversation about race and representation and disability and just difference and how it's handled on the shows. And then when George Floyd was murdered this summer, it became a more urgent conversation about what could we do as a company, what could we do that really addresses things, and we make sure that we're doing what the best that we can do for our stories, for our actors, for our people on set, to make a system more equitable and more honest.
Now, you gave kudos to Krista for pushing to make your position happen, but I'm going to circle it back around and give kudos to you, because you were her assistant at the time. And we work in Hollywood. There are movies written about how assistants get things thrown at them, get yelled at constantly. And in fact, there's a movement right now for assistants to be respected better. And that's a beautiful thing that's happening. So Krista tells the story very differently and very bluntly.
Yes. Yeah, Krista tells the story that I came into her office and told her writing was lazy and damaging. And I think I sprinkled a little sugar on that. I don't think I used those words, but that was for sure the gist of what I was saying. I think I said it nicer. But Krista is a rare person who is open to that, because honesty is important to her. And I think I was her assistant, but I was in a luxurious position of having a mid-career change. So I was an older person, a seasoned person. And also I was ready to get fired because this is something that's so important to me. So I'm like, you know what? I have to say the truth. I don't want the actors to see a script that might distress them. And I'm just, I'm doing it. So
no, but that's what I love about that story, is the idea that you felt the need to speak your truth. It might get me fired. It might cause problems. But if I say it the right way, if we have the conversation the right way, and if the employee is prepared to listen, perhaps something beautiful can come out of it. And in fact, something beautiful came out of that situation. And the funny part is that process kept repeating itself, I think, through this season, where issues would come up. We as a cast, as a crew, as a producing and writing, would have these hard conversations. We keep talking about having that difficult conversation in society about race, about gender. And we actually were having them, and beautiful things were coming out of it on the other side, because people were prepared to not get defensive and not shut it down, push all the way through. And then we ended up with some beautiful things on the other side. Talk to me, I'd love first with about the George Floyd's murder. We decided to make that a part of the show. So Kasha and Paris, give me an idea of, from the writer's room, before scripts got to us on stage, the actors, give us an idea of what was happening in the writer's rooms and at the producer level about how you introduced the murder of George Floyd and the social justice resurgence movement that we've had in the summer of 2020.
Well, I will just toss to Kasha. One thing I did want to say is, when that happened, suddenly I think Krista looked at the panoply of talent we have here and recognizes that for many seasons they were hardly Black or hardly Latin or hardly Asian. Hardly. I mean, sometimes glancingly, sometimes they would speak Spanish, but their actual racial identity was not explored. And so how this would impact firefighters in Seattle was kind of a lie, because they're not just going to keep getting cats out of trees after this happens. Everything is going to be different. And I just applaud all the writers and Christopher saying, let's make that show. Let's not make the show that continues to get the cats out of trees. Not that we've ever done that story. I think we should though. But let's do the story that how this would impact people who are of divergent races and are of different points of view and are of different socioeconomics. And some are from firefighter families and some are not. And some are Caucasian and are feeling just these winds buffeting them from all those different ways. Let's write to that. Did not have to be. It would have been much easier to just say, unfortunately, there's a really huge fire downtown. Ring, ring, let's go. But she just decided not to do that. And that's one of the things that made me so proud of this work. But Kasha, when George Floyd happened, how did that hit the writers' room? When did we decide to actually say those words?
The decision to address the murder of George Floyd and the social justice things on Station 19, it was an easy thought. You can't have a cast that's mostly people of color and ignore something that was so impactful, that was so big, that was so shocking, that was so, and continued to reverberate over and over and over. It just was not an option to ignore it. And I think on Grey's Anatomy too, as long as we address this through the filter of medicine, it was a smart thing because it affected everyone. I mean, the world was at a pause for, at least the first 2 weeks of it. It was everywhere. So the question was not, are we going to do it? The question was how we can do it. So that was a conversation with Krista and her number twos, and what's the right way to do it? How are the stories going to be? How how are we going to integrate this into a separate show? But I think that the idea that this is a major event that affected everyone, that was just a given, that was going to happen. I'm trying to remember. My most important note that I gave when this conversation was happening is to be very conscientious of the use of the name George Floyd, because we can be very casual with things and people, and he was not even a year past. So I said, if you use his name, please be referring to him as a person, as a man. Don't be referring to it as a shortcut or a shorthand, you know, in the same way that we would do with like an Emmett Till, which is years past. But I'm like, this is something that's fresh. He has family. We need to make sure if you say his name, please be referring to him as a person and not referring to it as a stand-in or as a symbol. And then another thing that I requested and pushed on is that this is it's an historical record in a way. Not only how is this show going to play when it airs, but how is this show going to look in 1 year? How is this show going to look in 5 years? We need to reflect the confusing, the infuriating, the painful, the agonizing, the sad time that it was, because it was a swirl of emotions and the sense of hope when everyone came out, but the sense of anger, like, where have you been before? I mean, it was important that be reflected in what the characters are, and that everyone responds differently, and everyone responded differently.
I think that's what I've appreciated so much, just as a fan of the show, as a viewer, and you know, knowing what's coming up as well, is that there is no one perspective, and that you've really explored how every human being feels, and how it's almost like you have to ask permission to have your feelings, and what does that feel like, and being able to say that out loud. I've appreciated so much being able to say things out loud that everybody's thinking. And I feel like there's been representation in there of all of those thoughts, you know, that people are afraid to say, or thoughts that people say all the time. And I think everybody as a viewer fell into there somewhere. You know, it's like, pick your person, you know, I'm a Jack that day, or whatever, you know what I'm saying? And I really appreciated that.
Yeah, it was, I mean, the thing for me was that variety of reactions and experiences. The lived experiences were so varied, and that we as performers got to collaborate with the writers. I mean, it really comes down to that therapy episode. There was, just to set the stage for the folks, you don't know the behind the scenes. We do a table read of every script, so the writers can hear the words said out loud, so they can get a feel of, is this story working? What needs to change? What's working really well and we need to keep. And that happens, of course, on Zoom in the age of COVID. So we were coming to do a table read of the next episode, and then we got the message, actually, table read's canceled. We're going to have a cast and producers meeting instead. And we got on, and the conversation was coming up. And this is, again, kudos to Krista for being perfectly open and transparent that this isn't quite working the way I want it to. And she literally was opening it up for a conversation with all of us. And we were all there, Gray, Jay, Boris, Paris, and a beautiful conversation happened. A hard conversation happened. And literally, I recall her in the middle of it. I laugh about it now because she does this thing where she looks like she's having a migraine. She looks away and she goes, I'm sorry, this is what I look like when I'm having an idea. And in the middle of that meeting, she came up with the idea to do a Zoom the therapist episode, where we can get into, there's been a death and we all need to process that. And some people won't want to process it, so they'll reject it. Some people want to talk about it immediately, just like we've been talking about in the real world. And it gave an opportunity. And also for some people, and some of the things I loved the most were, to be honest, Jay and Gray, your characters had these unique opportunities to get into conversations that weren't happening, because we in this country tend to think in terms of literally black and white, binary conversation. And your characters allowed for it to break into a much more rainbow spectrum of a conversation where, you know, I mean, I'd
gray,
love to
so
hear
to
from
speak. Yeah.
But yeah, but great. I'd love to hear, you know, because Jack goes on this journey, and he starts a journey in these episodes, and you and I have played a few scenes where, you know, from when Dean and Sullivan first get arrested by the police, Jack and Ben have a conversation about how do I be a friend for him? How do I be there for him? And that just got explored even more. I want to know how you felt going into those episodes in that conversation.
Well, you know how I felt. I don't know. I felt a lot of ways, because and it's actually kind of something I kept hearing, because I know a lot of people who know cops, but I'm like, and I'm kind of this, you know, my sister's husband is an ex-cop, and I see him post things online, and you know, before the George Floyd thing would happen, I would post, you know, videos about police brutality, and then he would post things and express, you know, like, you guys don't know what's going on. You're not a cop. You don't understand this, and this. And it was all, and I never engaged with him, you know, and it was kind of very like, but now it was like, sort of like it was like in everyone's face, you know? And like, I still don't know how to engage with him. But it just, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to feel about it, to be honest. I still don't. I think it's, I feel like, I don't really feel like cops need defending. That's how I feel. I think they've had protection. So.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a viewpoint that a lot. I mean, I come from a town, you know, military town, so there's a lot of people, and I know a lot of people who have that knee-jerk response, like you're talking about. You have friends and family that have this knee-jerk response to not want to have that conversation or push back immediately on that conversation instead of listening. And what I love is that Jack's become kind of the window for a lot of folks to begin to hear how, oh, I can see the other side of this conversation and see how it feels when I immediately go, hey, oh, you know, bad apples, you know, it's not all, you know, that sort of thing. And so that's has that felt like a responsibility for you to kind of
it's confusing to me, you know, because I feel how I feel, but I also there are parts of me that are like, that understand that too, you know what I mean? That understand that, like, we do need cops, you know what I mean? We do need, you know, protection. We do need, you know, some sort of order in society, you know what I mean? But what costs, sort of thing too, you know what I mean? And is this order, you know, like, but we don't need my opinion about these things. I'm just saying that, like, it was very confusing for me, and very, like, when especially shooting that therapy scene, I kept crying for some reason, and it was like it was a reason. It was like a point where it didn't make any sense. Like, and it was at the same part, and I don't. And anyone who knows me, like, it's not a very easy thing for me to cry as an actor. Because, you know, I should know how to, but it's not an easy thing for me. And while we were shooting that, I kept crying. Director kept coming up to me, and he was like, "Yeah, this is not really a cry scene. Like, this is like a, you know, you just kind of just trying to get your point across, you know, like, but, you know, this and that, you know? And I'm like, yeah, no, okay, yeah. And then we go again, and then I'm like, you know, and it would just come again. So I don't know. I mean, I just felt confused a lot of the time because a lot of me did understand where Jack was coming from, but a lot of me also was not understanding why I was defending this, to be honest. So I don't know. And I still don't. So I don't know.
Well, I mean,
can I
sorry,
just
go ahead.
say, Gray, that I think that you did beautiful work, and I understand how hard it was where everyone else got to kind of express their true feelings, but you had to serve a purpose, but it's an important one. And that part of the script, we went over and over with it because you have a very fine line, because you know, for better or for worse, you're the representative of the white man, the white person. So, you know, like striking the balance in that scene of respecting, not disrespecting that person's humanity who has a point of view that maybe we don't agree with, but also not seeming like you have this point of view and then the therapist is like, you're wrong, you're bad, you know, and being scolded, because, you know, the goal is to have people's ears open for understanding and seeing other people's journey. And I know that probably wasn't fun for you, but I think that the scene was effective because Jack was not demonized, and that Jack had an opportunity and grace, and I thought that your work was beautiful. And I was crying when you were crying.
It was definitely beautiful. And you know what? It's a crying scene today. It's a crying scene today.
You know what it was?
I've had friends comment on that scene to me, Greg. Just not for nothing. I've had white friends say, yeah, it was useful for, you know, I've had white friends say it was useful to have kind of my viewpoint and my confusion kind of being expressed, you know, and Jay, I mean, you were able to, in the conversation, you know, people have conversations and they're not understanding what the other person's talking about. They only want to have the conversation about what they want to have the conversation about. And I kind of loved your storyline in that episode where you broke into the conversation of, am I allowed to talk about the things that are affecting me, because it doesn't feel as big as the things that are affecting this other community. And I have some very dear friends who are Asian, and they said yes, and they felt that was, you know, and then we've now had it. It was right at a point in the world where we were starting to recognize the level of Asian hate that had been brewing over the course of the last several years, and fomented by some folks. So talk to me about collaborating and helping bring that storyline to life.
So Rochelle Zimmerman and Krista and the rest of the writers' room really, I felt like I had a large job to do, and I thought that their writing was showed a lot of grace and a lot of great perspective, and I wanted to try to do my part as best I could. And so I think I was one of the actors that actually just kind of, when the scene came out, I just needed to go to work on it. I didn't feel, I felt like I needed to do the best job that I could for Travis Montgomery. And it wasn't that I didn't want to participate in the dialogue or the story. I just needed to do my job and do it the best that I could. I, you know, growing up with a Korean mother, I definitely got that whole, like, don't make a fuss, put your head down. I definitely had those moments of, like, when somebody would say something or do something to my family, we would not talk about it. You don't, that's a cultural thing. It's like, put your head down and we'll outwork them and we'll win later. Like, it's a very Korean thing. So I related to a lot of it. I thought they did an amazing job with it. And it's true. You know, I think a lot of the AAPI community feels like this huge thing was and is happening, and that we don't feel completely allowed to talk about what's going on in our community. So I thought that was really great. And I mean, to be totally honest, being half, Andy Herrera said something in her part that I related to. She goes, most of the time I pass as white. I never really feel like I'm allowed to speak on behalf of the AAPI community. I was never accepted as Asian, especially in this industry. I was never accepted as white because you're something. So like the whole, I don't feel like I'm allowed to talk. I've been feeling that my whole life. So it's new for me. It was new for me to have dialogue in behalf of that community and that perspective. There was a part of me, and maybe this is the Korean part of me, that felt like I didn't deserve to be there. I didn't deserve to be able to say it, but I had to get over that. That's my own stuff. You know what? That's more therapy that I need. But yeah, I guess that's my perspective on that.
Wow.
Yeah, that episode opened up a lot of doors, and set the tone for the next several episodes that some of which you fans still have yet to see. There's some great ones coming up still. But I remember in that Zoom call, I think, in my recollection, Boris, I think it may have been something you said that actually may have triggered Krista to start thinking about the therapist episode, because I think you said something on the Zoom about there's been it's like a friend died. It's like someone you knew died. I think you said that on the Zoom, and I think that may have been what triggered Chris in the first place. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this whole process.
I think what I said was that it strikes each of us differently, and when somebody dies, everybody has a whole range of emotions that have no limits. Some people have to distract themselves. Some people compartmentalize. Some people grieve outwards very, very openly. Some lock themselves up. And I think what I said was that we have to be honest with that process and give each of us their own voice in expressing that however we see fit. And I think collectively we decided in that room, and obviously Paris and Krista in the end, is that it was okay to go away from that. Because this was an extraordinary event that happened that affected all of us immensely. And yeah, I mean, to piggyback on what you said, Jason, she had the balls to say, you know what, this is going to be a different show, and this is what we're going to do. And I believe this was the only decision to make. And I think that Zoom call sort of steered her in a direction where she felt empowered and encouraged to do so, to make that decision. And I'm really proud of her that she did.
And I mean, it sounds like she just made a decision and it all kind of worked out, but you were talking about what they don't see. What you guys didn't see that happened because you made that decision is one new episode had to be written and shot immediately. Another episode that had been previously shot had to be rewritten, and 2 days of it had to be shot. And then it had to be posted super quick because it was all in the ocean. Other episodes after that had to be completely revised with things that we had already prepared, thrown out. So there was a cost to all this. And Krista just went to ABC and said, this is what we're going to do. And ABC stood by her and made that happen.
Yeah, I mean, I remember thinking Hollywood's, I tell people all the time that Hollywood doesn't so much see black and white. Obviously it does, it lives in this country, but it really sees green. Is it gonna cost me or is it gonna make me money? And when this whole concept came up, an episode was invented. We were gonna do 15 episodes this season. And suddenly there was a new episode that was created on the spot, getting written. We were shooting it a week and a half later, a week later, I think, something like that.
About a week later.
About a week later, we're shooting it, and it aired just a couple, 3 weeks after that. So literally, millions of dollars got spent. Millions of dollars got spent on what felt right. And that's a rare thing to have happen in Hollywood, because Hollywood don't do that. It was fantastic. It's been a good season. And I'm just happy that there's a lot more coming your way as fans of the show. I got a little teary in the middle of this conversation, but I think we've all had that experience while we've been talking, because it's, even though we have to be socially distanced, when we've had the pleasure of being able to be close with each other, I think we've all been talking about what's been going on in the world, what's been going on in our industry, what's going on in our show. And I like to feel brought us closer together as a Station 19 family.
The fans should know there will be joy.
Yeah.
There will be joy. This darkness will not last forever. That's all I can say without being,
Yeah. The tail end of the season that you all are going to watch has some moments that were particularly fun for us to shoot and bring some joy. So finishing up the season, just like right now, I think we're feeling in our world. You see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's feeling joyful and it's feeling more positive. Look for that in what's coming in the rest of the season. It's I can't say too much more, can I?
No,
otherwise we'll give a lot away. And as you all know, they have ninjas in Trip to Light and Shondaland that will come and get you if you give up too much information. So thank you all for joining us and hearing as much as we could give you about the behind the scenes. Thank you all, my family, for being here and having this pretty open and honest conversation about all that's gone into making the season go. And everyone, make sure you tune in tomorrow night for another phenomenal episode of Station 19, 8 o'clock, 7 Central, ABC. Be there, we'll be there, we'll all be watching. And let's keep this conversation moving forward, not just on TV and amongst make-believe characters, but amongst everyone you know, amongst your friends and family. Because when you have that conversation, you open up, let yourself be a little vulnerable, beautiful things, beautiful connections come your way, and that's how things move in our society. So thank you all for watching. Thank you all for being here, and we will see y'all tomorrow night on TV.